Another episode of our progressive podcast, Conversations with Rob. Please like and subscribe the other interviews, and if you like more of these interviews, definitely subscribe. So I have a special guest here that's involved in the Democratic Party in Polk County, which is on the I-4 corridor, which is a big area here in the state of Florida, that if you win the I-4 corridor, you probably will win the state of Florida. It's Kathie Sutherland. And Kathie, who is a member of the DEC, she runs the DEC for Polk County. So, Kathie, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to interview with me.
My pleasure.
All right, so, Kathie, let's start talking about you. What made you get involved in politics? And also, after that, what made you become a Democrat?
Well, I've been a lifelong Democrat, but I have not been heavily involved in politics. So I was a practicing obstetrician gynecologist my whole life, and it left little time for other things. When we retired, we moved from California, a very blue state, to Florida, and were shocked at the lack of Democratic presence that we saw in our gated community. We were seeing a lot of Trump signs and a lot of almost excessive amount of discussion about Trump. And nothing from the other side. No Hillary signs, no discussion. Everybody was very quiet. So I was actually shocked when Trump was elected. I had not expected it. And it really pushed me into action. I'm a very action-oriented person. I was not going to mope about it and be sad about what had happened. I immediately began taking action. So I initially formed a group called United for Action, which is an indivisible group, which is primarily organized to talk to legislators, to try to get them to change their minds, to protest. We did all of the Women's March and Tax March and Science March and all of those marches that were going on in early 2017. But I realized at some point that was not working, that as long as the Republicans held the Congress and the Senate, we were not able to change them from pushing their policies, with a few exceptions. About that same time, my husband started a Democratic club at our gated community, and he sent out a notice expecting about 20 people to show up, and over 100 people showed up. What we learned is that the Democrats were there, they were just staying quiet. And so that Democratic club grew, and from there I became involved with the county, with the Polk County Democrats. It quickly became apparent that the Polk County Democrats were not an effective organization. They didn't have a grassroots strategy. They didn't have a vision. They basically were ineffective. So it was clear that in Polk County, we have about the same number of registered Democrats and registered Republicans, but the Democrats are not getting out to vote. So there's about a 10% differential in the turnout between Democrats and Republicans. And the county party was doing nothing to close that gap. And so it became clear to me that this was where we need to put our efforts. And so, again, I started working with the party, working initially on the grassroots recruitment and training. And then from there, I ultimately became the chair of the party in Polk County.
So Kathie, the thing that gets me is with the whole state of Florida. We've seen President Obama win it in 2008 in a close margin, 2012 to 16, Trump won by 1%. What I seen is, in going to college in South Florida, they're very active in democratic politics. As studying political science at my college down there, I got to travel with my advisor, who did a lot of speaking junkets in Democratic clubs, and there was tons upon tons upon tons of Democratic clubs in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. And now I know you said that you had started your own Democratic club. What do you think about Polk County as far as, like you said, there's just about the same as Democrats and Republicans. Do you see a lot of Democratic clubs popping up now because Trump has energized a lot of people with the impeachment for Trump, and also just some of his policies that have energized people? Do you see a lot of Democratic clubs like, Broward, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade?
Well, the answer is yes, but it tends to, it's one of our goals, it's one of our visions and strategies at the county level. So we find that new Democratic clubs and caucuses often need our input in order to really get started. And since the beginning of the year, we have started 2 new clubs and 3 new caucuses. But the way that we do that is we reach out to the local people, we send invitations, we have a meet and greet, we have an organizational meeting. And so again, there are many, many people out there who want to do something and don't know what to do. So clubs and caucuses are part of our strategy. The other really important part of our strategy is actually at the precinct level, which is truly the grassroots level. We have 167 precincts in Polk County, and if each one of those precincts has a Get Out the Vote organization, we will win Polk County.
Now, my thing is, and I do see a lot of building in Polk County. I know Andrew Gillum did pretty well in Polk County. My question is, in 2018, we saw the Democrats do extremely well in a lot of House races. I know there was a tough House race in Polk County with Kristen Carlson, lost Ross Spano in that race, but it was close. I was one of the people that was watching on election night in 2018, and watching Andrew Gillum, who I was really inspired by, and I really thought that he was going to win the election. There was polls upon polls that was saying Gillum was ahead by anywhere from 5 to 7 points in some polls as less as 3. And then he ended up losing by 30,000 votes after the recount. Nelson, who was well known around the state for many, many years, and he lost the tight race by 10,000 some odd votes to Rick Scott. What do you think were the positives and the negatives that happened in 2018 in one of my districts? Bob Doyle, who I interviewed yesterday, who was a really knowledgeable and great man, a military veteran. He lost a tough race by 11,000 votes, and he was a great candidate. So what do you think happened in 2018 with the Doyle race, but also with Gillum and Nelson?
Right. Again, very close races, and it does come down to voter turnout. Throughout the state of Florida and throughout and in our own county, the turnout was better for the Republicans. And so again, I look to where we can improve is at the grassroots level. And it's not, we can't just start working when we're working for a candidate. The candidates come and go. It has to be a year-round effort to mobilize, engage, and really encourage Democrats to become involved. So I think that has been lacking. It's improving. We increased our voter turnout in 2018 compared to 2014, because you have to compare apples to apples, by 8% in Polk County, which again is a nice improvement. To some extent, I think in terms of the governor's races and the Senate race, um, I've been impressed by the analysis looking at Gillum's number, at the number of Black women who voted for DeSantis. And I think they had an excellent strategy of targeting Black women who had children in charter schools by specifically telling them if Gillum was elected, their children would no longer be able to go to charter schools. I think that was a deciding factor for many Black women, and actually the numbers in Florida were enough for him to lose the race.
But Kathie, do you think though that those numbers were really correct? Because I heard on quite a few channels when they asked Andrew Gillum that in the campaign that they said they weren't 100% that. And I mean, if you think about it, and maybe the numbers were right. Like I know what you're saying about the charter schools, but why would I mean, I guess people vote against their interests all the time, but why would a African American woman vote again for Ron DeSantis, who's not doing as bad as Rick Scott, but he's doing pretty bad?
I completely agree with you, but the numbers do show that the Black women turned out for DeSantis. And so, you know, it makes no sense. And so you have to ask why. And for Black families who want to be upwardly mobile, there's nothing more important than getting an education for their children. And so I think it played a role. I don't think it was the only thing that played a role, but I do think that it played a role. The Nelson race is very interesting. We had the difference in the turnout between Democrats and Republicans just in Polk County would have been enough to put Nelson over the top. He would have won if we had if we had only had a 70% turnout of our Democrats.
Right.
So, you know, and that's just in one county, because again, all that he needed was 15,000 votes, and that's only 10% of Democrats in Polk County. So if we could increase our turnout by 10% in every precinct, which is only about 100 Democrats, we would be over the top. Turnout is one of our big strategies. It was in 2018 and it will be in 2020. But the other issue for us is voter registration, and we find that voter registration is always a key for presidential elections.
Right. And I agree with you. I think the Gillum race, and I'll leave it at this with the Gillum and the Nelson race. With the Gillum race, I think what you said could be true, but also with the maybe because he was Black, I think some people may have drifted away from that. With the Nelson race, I think that you're running against a millionaire that invested almost $60 million of his own money into that race. Yeah. And that's going to be tough to beat regardless of who you are or how many years you've been running around Florida. So that was tough. And then also with both of the races, and I know you've talked about this and we've talked about this in the past, is with the recount, the absentee ballots. They make it extremely hard with the signature stuff. Like who is a handwriting expert? Whether the person at the polling place or the division elections is a handwriting expert there could be people that have Parkinson's, elderly people that are my age, that may write their signature a different way every time. I mean, you look at those pads in Target or Walmart, somebody just scribbles the lines and stuff when they're signing for their credit card. I mean, that whole handwriting thing was a complete joke. And it just makes Florida look just almost, not as bad, but almost as bad as what happened in 2000. Not quite as bad, but on the same similar pedigree. But what did you think about that handwriting fiasco and the absentee ballots that could have cost a lot of votes? Maybe not to Gillum and put him over the finish line, but maybe to Nelson and would have made it a heck of a lot closer, too.
Well, the handwriting issues really varied by county. And in our county, in Polk County, actually Lori Edwards she avoids voter suppression. She wants people to be able to vote. And what they do is they keep a record of every time a signature is gathered. So every time you do a vote by mail, every time you change your voter registration, so sometimes they have a list of 6 signatures, and they'll compare a signature with all of them. And if it looks okay, they accept it in Polk County. So again, they're not fussing because you left off your middle initial, or they're not fussing because, something had a squiggle a little bit differently. So in Polk County, again, it's less often that we saw vote by mails rejected. Overall, in Florida, yes, there were vote by mails rejected, but the numbers, when you look at the total numbers of people who voted, is actually relatively small. And the fact is, when people vote by mail, the likelihood of them actually voting goes up really significantly. I mean, it almost doubles in many cases, in many targeted areas. So if nobody, if people, I hate to hear people say, oh, well, I'm not going to vote by mail because there's a good chance my vote won't be counted. It's actually more likely your vote will be counted because it's more likely you'll actually turn in your vote than if you're expected to go to the polls. Again, that's not you and me. That's not people who are politically savvy, but that's the average voter. So what we found is, by virtue of the fact that people voted by mail in Florida, if you voted by mail, you were 42 times as likely to have your vote counted than if you didn't. I mean, the numbers are just, it's just much better to vote by mail and have a few of them rejected than to encourage people to stop voting by mail. So again, the average vote by mail is a really important way of increasing turnout. It's the single most effective way of ensuring an increased turnout.
Well, I mean, you see a few other states, I believe Oregon, they vote all their ballots by mail. And I agree with you on that. I'm for that vote by mail just because you never know. Your kid could get sick. You could get sick. Some that you can't make it out of work. So, yeah, just to be safe. But to end on the 2018 thing, I do believe that there was ballots left out there, and there was, if you look at Miami-Dade County, not so much Polk County, I guess, was the leaving to the vote by mail problem. But if you look at some of the counties in South Florida and Palm Beach and Miami-Dade, I mean, look when that whack job was sending all the bombs to Obama and Hillary. There was a lot of ballots, and they shut down a couple of mail stations, a big mail station in Miami-Dade, and there was quite a few people that I heard on the news and on the internet that they said they had sent their ballots in and they were never counted because of that case and a lot of that vote by mail stuff in those counties, not so much in Polk County. So that's what I was kind of saying, that there was votes left on the table that maybe, I don't know if they would have made a difference. I'm not a higher being that can make that decision, but there was votes left on the tail in those prominently Democratic counties where they could have made some sort of difference.
Right. The numbers that I have, and this is coming from the Florida Democratic Party, where they've done a ton of analysis on this, is that there were 27,000 vote by mails where people either failed to sign it, the signature didn't match, or it was sent in late. But when you compare that 27,000 number with the 1,026,000 that did return their vote by mail, that's where you get this number of 43 people might not have voted, but for the fact, and actually that 43 people is taking into it, it's complicated because if you have a warm voter, it may double the chance of them voting. If you have a cold voter, it increases it by 10 times. So there's a lot of difference depending on what demographic you're looking at, but overall, it's 43. There's a 1 to 43 chance that your vote is more likely to be counted because you voted by mail than if you didn't, in spite of tossing out some of those votes. I think it's incumbent on us, on the people in the field, when we encourage people to vote by mail, we register them to vote by mail, that we point out that it's important to turn it in a timely manner, and it's important to sign the envelope and sign it the way you sign everything.
Right. No, I was just going to say, Kathie, that and to end about the vote by mail, and then I have two questions left. I was, as you, I'm very politically active and politically involved, and I did want to see Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson win, among other Democrats. Looking at that before the regular vote, looking at the absentee ballot, and you kind of just touched on this. I feel like a lot more Republicans were sending in their absentee ballots than the Democrats. Now, how do we get to these people to make sure that they're getting their ballots in? Is the Democratic Party or the Polk Democratic Party, the Florida Democratic Party sending out mailers or having people canvass to the house and say, hey, you haven't mailed in your ballot yet. You got to get that in by such and such a date, otherwise it's not going to count.
Right. Now we have, again, number one, the Republicans have always been better funded than we have. And they've used that funding in part to increase registration for vote by mail by sending out mailers. We have not had the funds to do that. And secondly, they've had mailers go out to recommend that people turn in their vote by mail. We have not had the funds to do that. This year is different. This year we are both the Florida Democratic Party at the Florida state level as well as at our county level. We are more aware that the fundraising is a key element to being able to communicate with our voters, especially our low turnout voters. And
right.
So that is one of the areas that we are working particularly hard on. We do have, as soon as vote by mail ballots drop, we do have a strategy called Vote by Mail Chase, where we either phone or text to get people to turn in their ballots. So we do have a strategy to do that, and we need volunteers to come out and help us as soon as vote by mail ballots drop. So that's, again, we did a good job last year. We didn't do a perfect job last year. I'm hoping to have more volunteers and more ability to do that vote by mail chase next year.
All right, and two more questions. Kathie, do you see any up and coming political stars in Polk County and also in the state of Florida? That because we do have obviously state elections as far as state house and state senate elections in 2020, and then we do have that governor's race the year after that. So do you see any up and coming people at first, like I said, in Polk County, but second of all in the whole state of Florida for those governors, and then we're going to have that Senate race right after the year after that for Rubio.
Yes, right. I can't really comment on that now. Even now, there's still people that are filing for the congressional seats, so it's a little early to comment on it. Okay. I know our county strategy as well as the state strategy is that we need to have a Democrat running in every race. So even if they may not win this time around, it's one of the ways that we build grassroots support, and it's one of the ways that we get people's name out. We build a bench. We really start getting people to understand that there are committed Democrats who are running throughout the county and throughout the state. So, so that actually is one of our goals. We have a number of Polk County goals that have never really been realized or matched before. One of them is to have a Democratic candidate for every race in Polk County, and that's something actually that Judge Doyle is working on. He is the chair of the Candidate and Campaign Recruitment Committee for Polk County. So, so one of our visions and one of our goals is most definitely to have good candidates running in every race.
And my last question is, Kathie, obviously we all know that 2020 is coming up for the big presidential election for the state. And we know it's always down to the wire, whether it's 1% or less than 1% as far as the presidential election. Now, what are you guys doing to either, we know there's a lot of Trump voters, and maybe you guys are doing this or not, but there's a lot of Trump voters that are not racist and not anti-Semitic, etc. There's a lot of Trump voters out there that say they're voting for Trump because they believe in a lot of his lies. When he ran, he said he wanted health care for all. He said he was going to bring back the jobs, etc. He said he was going to get out of the Middle East, and he seems like he's trying to dive more into the Middle East. So how do you either try to convert those voters, because like I said, they're not all crazy, either that, or how are you going to try to get more Democratic voters to turn out? And I know most of them should be mobilized, but for the ones that are like low-intensity voters.
Right. Well, I'm not convinced that you can persuade a Trumpster to change, and so that's an area that is very labor intensive with a small return on investment. We are directing attention to the non-party affiliate voters, which in Polk County is about 25%. We have again about 35% of both Republicans and Democrats, and then we have another lower percent, maybe 29% of NPAs. So we are addressing the NPAs, and especially this year, because the NPAs are unable to vote in the Democratic primary if they're registered as an NPA. So we are trying to educate them to that fact and encourage them to change their registration so that they can vote in the primary. We're reaching out to MPAs as well as to our Democrats. And most importantly, we're really trying to register new voters. We're looking hard at the returning citizens or the eligible felons that have regained the right to vote following the passage of Amendment 4, realizing that the legislature is trying to prevent them from voting, and this is, of course, in lawsuits right now with the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, NAACP have all filed lawsuits, but we are moving forward, trying to encourage them to register to vote. That would be an additional 1 million voters in Florida. Right. They may not all be Democrat, but it's anticipated that the majority would be. So we're having some successes there. We're looking at young voters. We're looking at unengaged voters. So again, we're trying to make sure that we increase registration.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just had one more thing before we go on Amendment 4, because you just brought that up. Now, is Polk County, and I know I've read in the newspaper in Orlando Sentinel that Orange County is going, their supervisor of elections is going to let people that, they want to register through Amendment 4 do that. Now, I don't know if some counties are and some aren't. How is Polk County going about doing that? Or is that true that that's how it is? Is some counties will allow that and some counties won't?
No, all counties can allow people to register, but it clearly says that they cannot register if they have crimes of murder or sex crimes, or if they must have completed their probation and parole requirements. One of the sticking points is that the legislature redefined that to say that parole and probation requirements include any outstanding fees. So that's been one of the issues that was passed by the legislature. It becomes very complex because there's not a good record of who owes which fees. And frankly, the Republicans are trying to scare the felons into not registering, because if they register incorrectly, that itself could be a felony crime. So, but most DAs, and again, I don't know about Polk County, and that's Brian Haas, but Hillsborough and Orange County, their district attorneys have both said they will not prosecute felons who, in good faith, think they are eligible to vote, even if it turns out that there was some small error in, something that they didn't realize, a fee that they didn't realize had not been paid. It's also, some DAs also, they have a lot of discretion in terms of how they manage this. And some of them have come out saying that you are allowed to do public service as a way of paying off the fees. And so they've actually said that they will allow simple public service, a day of picking up trash will be enough to cover whatever fees are outstanding. In fact, one said that he would personally walk the felon from his office to the supervisor of elections office, and they would pick up trash along the way, and that would be fulfilling of any required fees. So I think we're going to see, it's going to be a lot of county-wide discretion, and although I don't know exactly how our DA plans to handle that, I know our supervisor of elections is very open to accepting any of the registrations from eligible felons.
Well, that's good to know. It's just another Republican scare tactic to try to keep people that are legitimate away from the polls, and they're just trying to create a poll tax. It's just par for the course. So
yeah, voter suppression added. They can't win in they can't win in a fair fight, so they're gonna win by voter suppression.
Right. They did it in 2000. They'll try to do it anytime they can. But Kathie, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing you down the road soon. I really appreciate that. And I just want to tell everybody that if you're in Polk County or you're in the state of Florida, please get involved in the 2020 election. Because this is a pivotal election. I know every person says that it's the most important election of our lifetime, but it really is, whether it's what's going on in the White House or what's going on in the environment. I mean, we're seeing extremely strong storms. Miami's flooded constantly, almost every day, even on sunny days. So we have to get some stuff under control in this country. And the only way you can do it is to get good people that are qualified in office, and we don't have people qualified right now that are running the country. So I appreciate it, Kathie. Thank you so much for your time.
Right. Let me just say one other thing. Again, we do, the two things we need most are volunteers and funding. And so you can go to our website, polkdemocrats.org, and it is very easy to sign up to volunteer or donate. Volunteering, there is something for everyone. You don't have to walk and knock on doors. You can be a driver. You can stuff envelopes. You can do data entry. So again, I encourage anyone to, and start now. Don't wait until 3 months before the election. The time we need volunteers is now.
Kathie, do they do texting also?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
That's one of the biggest things we do in the office right now. Our office is open 5 days a week.
okay, so you can even do that texted, so it's easy. You don't have to talk to anybody. You can text if you want to do that, or you can, if you're a talker, just go out in the neighborhood and talk to your friends, your family, and your neighbors, and let's try to get out the vote, because we definitely, as I just said, need some qualified people, and not only the White House, but in the state of Florida. They're running amok in the legislature right now of what they're doing. So, Kathie, I appreciate the time again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your time.
Talk
All
to
right.
you soon.
Bye
Bye-bye
now.
now.